I guess I want to start by first introducing myself. I'm Laura Morrison, formerly a city council member. Thank you. The best job I ever had. I served 2 terms from 2008 up until January of this year. And I can tell you that at City Hall, environmental concerns are part of everything that we do. And while I was on the council, we had some big wins. You know, we instituted a single-use bag ban. We kept Austin Energy and the governance under the people. We had some big losses. A water treatment plant that cost $1 billion wasn't needed, was approved, but that's the way it goes. So we, right now, I'm now taking time off from formal work commitments, and I can tell you that the best thing I do every day is come down here and swim at Barton Springs. So I want to first thank, before I introduce our speakers, I want to first thank the folks that made Barton Springs University possible. We have several sponsors and partners, including the Kirk Mitchell Environmental Law Fund, Tracy and Michael DeLeo, the Cynthia and George Mitchell Foundation, Save Barton Creek Association, Bicycle Sports Shop, and many, many partners, including City of Austin Departments, University of Texas, Texas State University, Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District, and the Lone Star Sierra Club. So we have to thank all of them for making that possible. And just a couple of things. Yes? And 2 very quick housekeeping things. Well, we'll make it 3. One is that there is a study guide that Bill Bunch has ready to pass out to all the great students here and others that are spending the day here. The other thing I want to mention is that we're probably going to have the afternoon session slide for 15 minutes, 15 minutes later. So when it gets to be 1 o'clock, you can relax, and we'll be finishing up a little bit late. And secondly, lastly, there is grass up here if you want to get up nice and close. So with that, I want to thank the 2 gentlemen that are up here with me that we're going to have a dialogue and introduce them. I don't know if you all know that in 2012, the voters of Austin approved a new form of city government. Instead of all of the council members being elected at large, like I was, we decided to go toward a much-needed new form to have 10 geographic districts and a mayor. And Steve Adler here on my far right is the first mayor of that new 10-1 form of government. So I think you've been busy over the past 9 months, absolutely, you know, providing the leadership to help a really significant transition at City Hall and to transform the way we govern the city. And he has been working on traffic congestion, affordability, environment, and water and neighborhood protection. And he often talks about Barton Springs as being a magic place, which I completely agree with. Prior to serving as mayor, Steve had a successful legal career and a long history in civil rights law, and he also served as chief of staff for Elliott Shapley, where he helped keep North America's worst polluter, a copper smelter in El Paso, closed for good. Not long ago, he signed on the mayor's National Climate Action Agenda, as well as the Global Compact of Mayors, both of which are coalitions of mayors committed to taking bold action to address climate change at the municipal level. So, Steve, thank you very much for coming and joining us in this dialogue.
Thank you.
And we also have Reggie James, who leads the Texas chapter, the Texas branch, the Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club, with more than, yes, welcome. With more than 22,000 members throughout the state, and now celebrating its 50th anniversary and being the oldest grassroots environmental organization in Texas. And so thank you for that, your great leadership in that. I think we're all familiar, obviously, with the Sierra Club, but they work on so many issues and priorities: clean water and air, smart energy solutions, Texas land and wildlife legacy, water for people and the environment, responsible transportation choices, and a stable climate. So the Sierra Club is fortunate to have Reggie. He's an innovative nonprofit executive with more than 25 years of experience in consumer and environmental policy and Advocacy. He was formerly the director of the Southwest Regional Office of Consumers Union in Austin, and he's worked on legislative and regulatory advocacy for improved public and environmental health and safety, and for better low-income legal representation. And not to be forgotten, he's also a Navy nuclear submarine veteran. Welcome, Reggie. We're all going to sit down and try and just kick off a bit of a dialogue with these guys. But I wanted to say first that we will have time for questions and answers after about 1:45 or 10 till 2. So there's so many topics to cover, so please be thinking about what you want to be asking these guys after. But I thought we could start by just sort of handing it over to you and each of you making a few introductory comments before we get into specifics. So Reggie, you want to get started?
Okay, thanks, Laura. And I'd really like to thank SOS and Bill Bunch for putting this together. It's a brilliant idea. I hope it keeps going. And I'm not sure if they arranged the seating by age. I kind of wish that the younger people were up here, but so be it, just so long as they're listening. One of the things that I want to touch on is that Austin is really growing. And I can, just for my personal example, I didn't grow up in Austin for the most part. I lived all over. My dad was in the military. Then I grew up mostly in San Antonio. I don't know if anybody's heard about this incident where the high school football players crashed into the ref. You know, one knocked him down and the other one popped. That's my high school. Go John Jay! I don't have anything bad to say about San Antonio, though, because they're doing some pretty innovative things, as is Austin. Sierra Club is doing stuff from the international level. We're going to be present at the Paris talks on climate change. We're doing national work. We're doing everything we can to shut down coal-fired plants. In Texas, we're very proud of the work that we've been doing to try to fight fracking and deep well injection, LNG tanks in the valley, that's liquefied natural gas, pipelines all over the place, but also on water. We're doing a lot of water conservation in every district of the state, but we're focused very, very closely on Central Texas, and we see lots of innovative work happening here. The big thing we want to see is not only do we want it to be a wonderful place to live here and to have water for future generations, but we want to be the example that other places strive to be like. So that's what we're doing, why we think it's important, thinking from the global to the local. And I moved to Austin in '83. I got here as fast as I could, and I love it.
Thanks, Reggie. Steve?
I guess getting here in '83 makes you kind of a newbie. I got here in '78. I came down here for law school. I grew up inner city D.C., went to college outside of New York, but I came down here because it was the cheapest law school in the country. When I got down here, there were only two tall buildings downtown. There was the black building and the gold building. And when you look at the skyline right now, you can't find either of those two buildings, in part because the gold building isn't gold anymore, but it's also, it's just so small, it gets lost. We are fast growing. We are the fastest growing metropolitan area in the entire country. We have been the last 4 years. We are growing 30% faster than number 2. I mean, that is just, it's incredible, the growth. With that growth comes incredible challenges that we have to deal with and that we have to resolve. When I arrived in Texas, I got here literally the day before my summer section in law school started. I had 2 old buddies from D.C. that picked me up, and they picked me up at the airport. And on the way back to the floor that I slept on in Hyde Park, my first several days here in Austin, we came by this pool. 45 minutes after arriving in Austin, Texas, I was in Barton Springs. This is a magical city. There is a special spirit and soul to Austin. You go anywhere in the country or the world and say you're from Austin, it means something. And what it means to most people is the intangible. It's a way of thinking. It's a spirit. It is a value. And center to all that is Barton Springs. It is iconic and it is emblematic of what it is that is special about this town and special about the people in this town, given what the people have done to try to protect this. The investment that we've made as a community on open space and preserving land is unmatched if you look at other cities. So I am looking forward to this conversation. I love this city, and I'm excited that so many people are here for this college. Bill, I think this is a great thing to do.
Thank you, Steve. So we're at the Springs. I thought I would throw out a topic first to discuss that has to do with the salamanders, because, you know, obviously we've got some endangered species here. And last year, I don't know if you all know this, but last year the U.S. Fish and Wildlife approved a 35-year permit for people to be able to swim in Barton Springs. I don't know if everybody knows, but we are guests here in the habitat of the salamanders, and I'm so proud to be part of a city that has biologists and water scientists that really make that happen. As Steve mentioned, we've spent $157 million on open space acquisition, and they're at 25% of the property in the Barton Springs zone is protected. On the other hand, CAMPO, which is our regional metropolitan regional planning organization, has a plan for the next 25 years that layouts the regional transportation ideas and spending. And in the next 5 years, it looks to be spending $1.5 billion on building roads in the areas that we're looking to protect, which will, of course, then be, you know, spurring some of that development. So I guess my question and topic, and I don't know how you want to address this, but there appears to be some apparent conflicts. And could you comment on those conflicts? And is it possible, whether you believe it's possible, to shift the regional perspective to more protection, to prioritize protection of the environment a little bit more? So I don't know who wants to start on that one, but yeah, what are we going to do about that?
There's no question but that it requires a regional approach. This is not something that the city of Austin can do by itself. While Austin may be the fastest growing metropolitan area in the country, the fastest growing city in the country is San Marcos. San Marcos is in northern Hays County, so it is kind of south and west of where we are. And the values in Hays County and in northern Hays County are not coincident with the values that we have in Austin, nor are the values in Williamson County the same values that we have down here. We have different priorities and we have different emphasis. We will not be able to save this region if we are battling our regional partners. And the trick and the future depends on the relationships that we can build regionally. So we have to spend a lot of time doing that, and we've already started that here. You know, I spend a lot of time with, obviously, the people in the city of Austin, but I'm spending a tremendous amount of time with the people that are on Campo that are not from Austin. I'm spending a lot of time with Will Connolly. I'm spending a lot, who's his northern Hays County judge. I'm spending a lot of time with the Campo representatives that come from Williamson County. And the question is, can we in fact get people focused on a common idea? And it hasn't happened in the past, I think, in part because they haven't talked to each other and found where those common grounds lie. While we're setting that up, the best example of moving forward on that is something that we're doing right now with respect to wastewater. So we're headed for this inevitable battle with the city of Dripping Springs, who is a growing city that does not share the same priorities and values that we have. They have to do something with their wastewater, and their answer to that is to go get a discharge permit to dump their treated effluent in Onion Creek, which would be horrible. The legislature, which also does not share Austin's values, is considering a bill last session to stop City of Austin from being able to contest the permit that the City of Dripping Springs would bring, to get us out of the equation altogether. Barely were we able to keep that from getting passed. But what it does mean is that we're now headed to this battle in the TCEQ over this discharge permit. For the very first time, we had a regional meeting on wastewater discharge in a way that hasn't happened before. We have some of our water folks here, and Lauren Ross was participating in that. The goal was to actually use the resources that the City of Austin has to find what the solution would be that we would use if we were the City of Dripping Springs, that they're never going to find because they don't have the resources or the staff to be able to do that. The question for our folks were, if we were Dripping Springs, what would we do? And it actually involves going to the TCEQ and asking for a rule change. But we're going to go as a region for a rule change with TCEQ in order to try to do what we can to protect Onion Creek from those cities. And I think we need a lot more of that kind of activity.
Thanks. And from your perspective, Reggie, and
he's pretty much answered most of it. However, there is an attitude within the region, and the mayor did point out that a lot of the other communities in the surrounding area don't necessarily share our values, but they do share our needs. And there are things that it's possible that Austin could leverage to help get the other communities' attention. There was a related question that I wanted, since I think that was a pretty good answer, that we do have to work regionally to figure out how to do these things in the right way. But there's also, the region is going to develop. It is the fastest growing region in the country, or one of them. And I mean, I admit, I was not born in Austin. I came here, so it would be kind of hypocritical for me to say, you know, we're going to put up roadblocks and not let anybody else come in. We have to try to make sure that the people coming in, not just to Austin, but to the other surrounding areas, come in and buy into the culture that we have. And that might be something we can do to our regional partners. If there's something they need from Austin, they have to buy into our culture, or else they don't get. I mean, that's playing hardball, but playing nice may not get it. So there was a question that I wanted to follow up to the mayor with. There are a lot of businesses, a lot of people that want to come to the state. I mean, that want to come to Austin or come to the surrounding area. And I'm sure that the Chamber of Commerce is attracting them here, but the city is also. And if there is an opportunity to change their behavior, is it being taken advantage of? So if there's a company that wants to locate here, what are we doing to tell them, if you come here, you have to behave in a certain way? You have to come here and you can't waste water. And it's not just complying with the law. It's going beyond that. How do we ensure that the people that are coming in here can quickly buy into our culture?
I think ultimately the answer to that question is how do you make it attractive for people to behave in that way? We can't govern who comes here on an absolute basis. I mean, the Constitution doesn't let us decide who comes in and who doesn't come in. At one level, the people who come here, generally speaking, are people that share our values because they're coming to Austin, Texas. I mean, they could have gone to Dallas or they could have gone to Houston. So we start off with a pretty strong base. And then you look at the things that we're doing to actually encourage people to come here, the businesses that we try to recruit, the businesses that we go after. We have to be really focused on who it is that we're trying to create the environment where they do come, rather than having businesses that are going in the Southwest or businesses that are bringing in a lot of high-tech, white-collar, high-paying jobs. We should be focusing on people that are locating on the eastern side of town and are bringing in jobs and training people who live here to take those jobs. And then beyond that, I think that part of it is, you know, you've asked almost a culture question, which is hard to answer because it's really hard for a city to force a culture, but we have to do everything we can to encourage it, which is why we spend so much time educating everyone who comes into this city on issues like water reuse. I mean, it's why we have programs that have incentives for people who will set up solar. It's the modeling that we do on the kind of power that we buy and how we set things up. If you have a more direct way to be able to force people to do it, I'll take that. I'd love to know what it is.
We could check their visas when they come across the border, maybe, and talk to them then. Well, you've talked, you know, the regional issue is huge, and touched a little bit on water resources and water resource planning, which definitely has to be done on a regional level. You know, the city of Austin had a water resource task force last year that recommended that the priorities for water supply should be, number one, conservation, because that's the cheapest water you never used. Number two, efficiencies. Number three, local sources. And only then other sources. But on the other hand, we read in the paper about, you know, discussions that are going on about East Texas and building really expensive and high energy use pumping of water pipeline, you know, water through pipelines. Brings up all sorts of fascinating issues about urban versus rural. But I guess the question is, what can the Sierra Club, or how are you involved in that discussion, and how is the city of Austin involved in that discussion? Because it is a cultural issue. You know, the water use per capita in the city of Austin dropped dramatically over the past few years, and we're all fine, just fine. So.
In Sierra Club, we know that, one, I'd like to commend, there's several cities I think that are doing a pretty good job. We participate on these task force. We're pushing constantly for the strongest standards for conservation first, and we're not going to even exhaust all of the mileage that we can get out of conservation, so we have to keep pushing. A lot of what Sierra Club is doing is working in all of the other regions also. It's not just Austin, it's the people upstream of us, it's the people downstream of us, it's the people to the east who we might be looking to get water, and we don't want to do that. But we also want to work with them and say, you don't necessarily want to give your water to somebody else if they haven't done everything they can to conserve, or all of the other programs that they might. So we're spending a lot of time in the other regions, up and down our own watershed, because there are lots of, I mean, you wind up having problems if you have good compliance in Austin, but people in Austin find out downstream there's water waste, then they're going to say, why the heck am I doing this? So we are also spending time downstream trying to make sure that they're being responsible also, so that the people here don't feel like their efforts are gone for naught. But that's what we're doing as an organization, but we're going to keep pushing as hard as we can in each place, and we want to keep pushing as hard as we can on the bright spots, like Austin. San Antonio's doing some pretty innovative things. But the better the cities like Austin are doing, the more we can use them as an example when we're pressing another place to do better.
Gentleman just took my. Okay. I thought maybe Steve and I just got to yell and you got the microphone, Reggie. That's all right.
I think he just likes me.
That could be. Steve, did you want to comment?
Well, you know, this time last year, Lake Travis, the Highland Lakes where we get our water from, it was the levels were dropping down to 30% of the capacity of those lakes. The very first thing the city council did when it came into office is we made it rain and to fill up the lakes. So the level of the lakes goes up to 80%. And then the very first thing that you start hearing from people is that now that the lakes are full, we can stop the conservation efforts that we're doing. Now everybody can go out and water their lawns whenever they want to be able to water them. The first thing we need to do is make sure that we don't let up on the conservation efforts we're taking. If anything, we increase those, because we've demonstrated what water conservation can do, not only to the bills that people pay, but also to what we have in our lakes. We have a much better position to argue for maintaining those lakes if we're real prudent about the water we use. You talk about looking downstream and making sure that they're not using more water than they should. Their lead argument for using more water downstream is that we're not doing everything that we can to conserve. There are things that we should be doing in the city from a land planning perspective. I would support us, ending the practice of having Bermuda grass in new homes and subdivisions that are being developed. So there's still those things that we should be doing as a city, and to preserve the water that we have. It will cost us billions of dollars to build the pipelines to go over to the east of us to Bastrop County, to the aquifers there to get water. And we have an answer to that if we just guard and protect what we have.
So let me follow that up. We have a lot of people here that are probably in their teens, and let's look into a crystal ball 70 years into the future, and I don't think we're going to be here necessarily, but some of these folks are going to be here, and here's my question. Will a limit to our water supply eventually limit the growth in our region?
I hope we don't get there. I think we know that you can't really limit development. I mean, as much as you might want to, you can control what the development is, you can control where the development is, but the simple fact that development happens, it's inevitable. That's just the way it is. You might find places that are more attractive, and that may change things. But 70 years into the future, we may run out of water. And actually, I think that might be the picture that we have to use modeling to start showing people what life might be like with conservation efforts and other efforts at this level, at this level, at this level. This is what it'll look like in 20 years. This is what it'll look like in 50 years. And that goes back to the culture issue. I'm not sure if people really know what it will look like. I've asked my kids before, have you ever been thirsty? And they said, well, yeah, I've been thirsty. And I said, well, how long was it between the time you were thirsty and you got a drink? Well, there are people that, actually have been thirsty and couldn't get something to drink. And that's not a concept that people can grasp. So I think it just has to be made real somehow, but it has to be made real now.
I don't know how you stop growth. And I don't know how you stop growth in a city that is as attractive and as magical as Austin is. People are going to want to come here for all the reasons that we came here and for all the reasons that we want to stay here. I don't know how you stop growth until you make the city so that it's not an attractive place to come. I certainly don't want to be the mayor whose position it is, I'm going to make the city so unattractive that no one wants to live here. Really? But then we wouldn't want to live here either. And if there's something you still like about it, somebody else is going to come too, because they're going to like that as well. So the answer to the question, I think, is a horrible one. I mean, the answer is that if we're not smart about what we do, if we're not careful, if we don't provide for being able to maintain a community where it is special, then yes, then we dry up and we blow away. And that would be unfortunate because Austin goes. And the answer, I don't think, is figuring out how to stop growth, because I don't know how you do that. Everyone, I got here in 78. And this was an incredible place in 78. It was those people that arrived in 79 that started screwing things up. And everybody thinks that, regardless of when you got here. You got here in 83, you love it, and the people in 84 screwed it up. And that's I think who we are, and that's who I think we will always be. We just have to be we have to be smart, and we have to be careful, and we have to be proactive in terms of protecting what we have.
I want to add one thing to this. I want to be careful in this comment, though, because I really want to ensure that residential interests, especially low-income interests, are protected. But if you're not going to stop growth, if you're not going to stop development, and I agree, I don't think it's possible, then maybe some more innovative ways of allocating the cost should be thought about. So if you have big users, then they have to pay a higher proportional cost. People are agonizing over how you get, like when you start doing conservation, people are using less of the good. They're paying for less of the good. How do you pay for the infrastructure if you're using less of it? And we want them to use less of it, but then that reduces the revenue that the city has. So if you are allocating a much greater burden for the cost to the biggest users and to new users who are coming in so that they have the incentive to reduce their costs by doing innovative things to reduce their costs, then I think that is an answer. And in some respects, it would limit development, because if there is a water hog that wants to come here and they see the price tag of what it's going to cost them because the city is really going to crack down on them, maybe they'll think twice.
Yeah, and I think really important point about equity too, because if maybe you can always get water here if you pay enough money, but that just means that the people that don't have a lot of money aren't going to be able to live here. And the other thing I wanted to add here is it is a cultural thing. It is we got to get it. We got to figure it out and help people understand it now. And I wanted to suggest that you all take a look at what's going on in Sao Paulo, where they're out of water. And buildings, residential buildings, have their water turned off a few days a week. So it's happening, folks, in other places. So I want to just do one last question briefly and then turn it over to some Q&A, and that is, so we've got this wonderful audience of young people that we're entrusting the future to, and what are your thoughts on how most effectively these folks can get involved and really affect the future?
I heard a couple of the panels earlier. For all of the younger people, pay attention to what's going on in your household. Ask to see the water bill and the electric bill. Talk about what the bill is with your parents. Get yourself informed and challenge them. I guess I didn't always tell my kids, just be quiet and leave me alone. If they pressed me enough and they were smart about how they did it, I listened. And I think that your parents will. So that's the first one. Your teachers, ask them questions. Make sure that the schools are actually talking about these issues. Join Sierra Club and go into your parents' bedroom late at night, get their checkbook, and write me a really, really fat one.
That may be the best answer I've ever heard. What would I recommend the young people do? Vote. Vote. The demographic in this city, 18 to 25 in this city, does not vote. You know, there was a day in the city of Austin in the early 70s when the University of Texas, the students at the University of Texas, decided who the mayor was in the city of Austin. Last year, in the last election that we just went through, the numbers of UT students that voted was tiny and heartbreaking. So I would say first, vote. And second, I would say vote. And third, I would say vote. Fourth, I would move off the list. Fourth, I would say is really start living to be the change that you want to see. So by the conduct that you do, by how you live and how you practice, I think you begin to change things. And frankly, I think that while 18 to 25 doesn't vote, 18 to 25 and the millennials are living differently than we lived. They are spending less time in cars. They're choosing to live in ways that have a smaller footprint. And in that respect, they're investing in companies and buying products like Tom's Shoes and other things, other companies that are socially active and socially responsible and providing a social return. So I'd say live what you want to see.
Thank you. So does anyone have any, now we'll turn it over for questions. Does anyone have questions? Yes, sir.
Do you think the environment is ultimately compatible with capitalism?
No. The question is, do you think the environment is ultimately compatible with capitalism?
I was a consumer advocate for 25 years before doing this, and I loved the work. I worked for Consumer Reports. One of the things that I was disillusioned with was that we could only tinker around the edges. We could only help. We could inform consumers. We could regulate industries, banking, those kinds of things to protect them. But there was a fundamental flaw in that businesses were always going to exploit consumers. And it's the nature of the system. I think I don't agree on the environment. I think that there are inherent problems with the system of capitalism, especially unfettered, but I think you really can regulate the market, and the market can work if you do it honestly. If you allocate the actual externalized costs to whoever's creating that, the real pollutant, the market will help you do that. So I'm not an unfettered market capitalist. And on the consumer side, I think it's a flawed system. It's never going to work. But on the environmental side, I don't believe that. I do believe that you can have a healthy environment and a market economy that works. But you have got to discipline the hell out of the market economy.
No, I think that if you take capitalism in its most unregulated form, I think that is inconsistent with saving the environment, because I think that it's too short-term in its focus, and because it's what is best for the environment is not always the most efficient short-term solution, and unbridled capitalism will always go to that place.
Okay, I'm going to call on one other person, but after this, I'm going to call on somebody with a question who is under the age of 20. So somebody under the age of 20 needs to think of a question. Yes, sir, you had your hand up.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be loud. Mr. Mayor, there are strong parallels between the city of Austin's situation with Dripping Springs and 15 years ago, the city of Kerrville's situation with Ingram. Ingram being a kind of a poorer city upstream from Kerrville, Kerrville being kind of a richer city who didn't want the Guadalupe River to come down to them with pollution in it. Ingram was using thousands and thousands of septic tanks, and Kerrville wanted them to convert to a cleaner system. Well, they worked it out to where the city of Kerrville treats the water from the city of Ingram. And this seems to be the solution to the Dripping Springs situation. The parallels are very strong.
Sounds like a good idea to me. We have our City of Austin water folks that are actually working and authored this concept of the regional approach and the regional rule change. So I know that their head is in this game right now in terms of what we have done in a smaller way is we have used our resources to try to help that city solve its problems.
Well, we can treat their wastewater with 23 miles of pipe.
Thank you. And by the way, when we were talking about this topic earlier, you used the term effluent. And in case anybody doesn't know, we're talking about what to do with their sewage, just to be clear. Is there somebody under the age of 20 that wants to ask a question? Anybody? Not yet. Okay, soon. Oh, soon. But another question in the back, the woman in green.
Thank you for providing this forum. It's been a delightful day and very important to me because I love Martin Springs. My question is this. I agree totally that it's a cultural change, and I have a little watershed in my neighborhood up at the Quarry Lakes, and I know it could be in a better state of health. I see the city watershed people out there testing the waters, but for example, I can't find those reports, you know. And second, is there a point person with the city who can help someone like me? You know, I appreciate what you said, Mayor, about we've got to make the solution look more attractive. I don't know how to do that when it comes to picking up dog poop.
That's a great question. She's asking about how she's got a watershed that she's concerned about right in her neighborhood. How does she connect with the city to monitor it and get the help that she needs?
The most direct response to that would be find him, because he'll put you in touch. Because to the degree that that information is not publicly available and searchable, then that's a problem in the city. So all that kind of data needs to be open source so that anybody in the community has access to that data for all of the uses that anybody in the community might put that data to. So one, for your specific question, to get you the specific information you need, see him. The question I have for you more generally is, can we post that kind of information if it's not otherwise being posted?
So please visit the City of Austin's Watershed Protection Department. You can access over 400 scientific reports. You can access all of our raw data in almost real time. And yeah, please find me if you want a direct link to that.
Yes.
That's what I was hoping. So it's all available. It's all on the website, almost in a real time basis. We log in those readings when they come in. How do you get your neighbors to pick up their dog poop? That's the cultural issue. And I don't know that ultimately there's a city answer for that as much as it is a neighborhood answer and a community answer for helping to set that.
That organization of my community. When I went on neighborhood night out every year, it's whatever I'm doing isn't working. Talking about dog poop is not what they want to talk about. So I'm looking for that help.
Sounds like to me it could be an important function of the Sierra Club chapter in that area.
Well, not only that, you can always call 311 to hopefully get some information. And if that doesn't work, you can call the mayor's office. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I figured you deserve that. Okay, so I'm sorry, we're gonna have to do this. We're gonna take one more question, and then gonna have to close up. Yes, ma'am.
So the question was, from a land development standpoint, what is the city doing to help make sure that if we're gonna grow, we grow in a right or smart way? How do we disincentivize sprawl? How do we discourage that kind of development? How do we make it so that we're not increasing the number of irrigatable lawns that are going up in all the homes? And I would say that part of that question is a question of will. We can't limit the number of residential building permits globally, but what we can do is invest our capital infrastructure not in putting sewer lines and wastewater lines to the farthest reaches, but focusing on spending our infrastructure monies on transportation corridors and on urban centers so that we encourage the kind of development that we like. We're doing something this year that has never been done before, that I know that there were attempts to do it before and the votes didn't exist, and I think they exist now, to do things like putting in a meaningful transportation impact fee in the city of Austin, so that developments that are expanding the reaches have to pay disproportionately for what it is that they're creating. So there are land development things that we need to do and that we should be doing to help encourage the kind of development that we want to see and make it more expensive for someone to do the kind of development that we don't want to see. Which gets me back to the first question, which was vote.
Well, I'm glad you hit the key one. Was if you can't just mandate that someone does something, you still have a lot of power to make it cost them more to do the wrong thing. And maybe it's a much higher level. I remember when I first moved to Austin, it was not long after Barton Creek Mall had been built. Loop 360 had just been built, and there were roads going west where there weren't any, where nobody lived. Now lots of people live out there, which meant that I just subsidized all of that growth. course, I was a law student at the time, so I didn't have any money. It's not like I was really, really subsidizing, but in theory I was. It was coming out of my pocket to build a road to nowhere that some developer was hoping, and they did. They built Bowie High School, all of these different things. So that's everything that was done wrong. And I guess the city of Houston is, I don't want to use them as a model, but if you want to talk about how horrible things had been, there was no zoning anywhere. They could do anything they want. And then they had horrible flooding problems. And they did have to start cracking down. They did have to start actually imposing some rules, not so much the rules. They did some crafty things to change costs so that people developed in different ways. They're nowhere near where they need to be, but they made a really fast movement in a short period of time because they had no choice. The whole city would have been underwater had they not done something. So, but the instruction from that is you can do a lot with making it cost them more to do the wrong thing and making it less expensive to do the right thing.
Thank you. And we're going to close up in a minute. Don't forget, we're going to slide the next sessions to start at 1:15, and there's this study guides. Bill probably still has them if you need them. And so just to close up, I wonder, you know, it might be a little scary to be a young person today. We've got climate change. We've got a lot of challenges that are at their feet. And I wonder if you could talk about, are you optimistic? And how do you see the future unfolding and the work that's going to be done?
I go back and forth. The more I look at the data on climate change, the more I don't want to look at the data on climate change, because it's pretty darn scary. And a lot of the damage has been done. A whole lot more damage will be done. So some of the, even if we got everything right tomorrow, we've already created some pretty bad problems. I mean, you know, polar ice is melting. It's going to change the salinity. I don't want to go into all of the details, but that damage has been done. And the issue now is to really not make it radically worse, because the damage is accelerating faster the longer we wait to really deal with it. So I'm not too optimistic on that front. I'm very optimistic on culture changing. And you were already seeing some of it with much younger people, and they are leaving a smaller footprint. Unfortunately, one of the reasons that they're leaving a smaller footprint is that they don't have any money. So, but I think that by behavior they are. There's lots of people living together. They do want to live close in. They do like walking to places. They like having funky music in cafes close to their house. And that's a good thing. So we'll start resembling Europe a little bit more, and that's a good thing.
I'm real optimistic. I have 3 girls, 24, 28, and 30. And they and their friends have an entirely different focus than I did and our generation did at that same age. I think they're a lot more attuned. I think they're a lot more aware. I think they're living lives that are more reflective of the way that people need to be good stewards of environment and of the world. And I choose to believe that out of that spirit, those answers will come, because I get incredibly depressed when I look at all the other stuff that you're looking at. And because there's no other choice. I mean, this next generation has to do better.
Thank you, Steve. There is no other choice. So how about a round of applause for these guys? Thank you so much.